Hi all students, I trust you had a good weekend. Welcome back to BCA and lecture number 7. Let's take a look at what we're going to do in today's lesson. It is something a little bit more challenging than we are used to, but I'm sure you will get it right after you have watched this video. As usual, we go to content on Blackboard. We go to our MS practical tasks. We finished with our logical if statements, and today we are going to take a look at V and H lookups. I am going to do 2 videos for you, one for VLOOKUP and one for H lookup. We will begin with something called a VLOOKUP. If we go into the activities, you will have a look. There is 7.1 to 7.4. I am not going to do them all with you. That is me doing your work for you. So I am going to do 7.1 and I'm going to do 7.3 in order for you to understand how the VLOOKUP and how the H lookup works. 7.2 and 7.4 is for you to attempt on your own. Let us first start by example in order for you to understand what a VLOOKUP does. And I have a sample spreadsheet here. I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that you can see. And if you have a look on the left hand side, here is a stock list of clothing. We have stock code, we have item description, and we have price. Now what VLOOKUP does is it has an input where we search, and it essentially returns an output from somewhere on your spreadsheet. And the way the VLOOKUP has been set up in this spreadsheet, let me give you an example. I put in there number 4 and it will give me the price. Number 4 is a tie and it's 56 Rand. There we go. Let's us use another example, number 8, and it will tell me there the price of number 8 is 154 Rand. If you have a look at your VLOOKUP syntax, please don't let it confuse you. My formula has moved. There we go. If we have a look at this of our VLOOKUP, it's saying VLOOKUP G6, then it's showing you a range, then it's showing you what they call a column index number, and then it's showing you what they call false. Please don't let all of this confuse you. I'm going to jump into a slideshow briefly so that we can see what we are talking about. If you look at my following example at the top here, and let me make this larger again for you. There we go. The syntax of a VLOOKUP. Fortunately, you do not have to learn the exact syntax. We are going to use the formula function in Excel to do this, and you will see how that works just now. Do not let it confuse. Equals VLOOKUP. Where do we want to look up? And the lookup value in our case was where we input the price or input the stock number. There is something called a table array, which is a range. So if I go back to the beginning, A1 to C31. If we look at that, that is called my table array. It is a range. So do not be confused by the fact that a table array is actually a range. Then we have column index number. Your column index number, let's have a look at our example here. We were searching, let's search for stock number, item number 10. It's telling me there it's 195 Rand. column number 1 of my array or my range, column number 2, and column number 3. If we look at our VLOOKUP example, we will see it is telling me the answer is in column number 3. Now I can imagine by this stage you are very confused, students, because VLOOKUP is not using specifically what we are extremely familiar with. It is something new. So stick with the video and you will at once we have done the example understand what we are talking about. Okay, I'm going to change my example here. So my VLOOKUP is sitting there. If I double click, there's my VLOOKUP. So just once again to recap, VLOOKUP what? My input, which is in G6. Go and have a look in the array A1 to C31. Return for me what is in column number 3. And the last one, the false, just means return an exact match. In other words, it's not 92,51 or 92,48. It is a whole number, and the majority of the time you will be using false in the VLOOKUP. Let's go and create another VLOOKUP. What I would like to do in this one, and we're creating our first VLOOKUP, before we even get to the activity, I would like to put in the stock code, and I would like to know what it is instead of the price. So I would like the description. So instead of price, I'm going to type here description, and let's do our VLOOKUP. I'm going to delete that. So we have an input and we have an output. Whoops, I spelled description wrong. Let me just fix that quickly. There we go. The VLOOKUP goes where the output is. So where we want the answer in effect. I'm going to go to formulas, insert function, and the function, I have found it, I have used it before, so it's showing on my table, so I do not have to search for it. I'm going to choose the VLOOKUP. Okay, now I am presented with a series of questions that may look like they are confusing, but they are not. They are actually fairly straightforward. The first thing is the lookup value. So where are we searching? We are searching, or we're going to put our search field, or where we would want to look up. In our case, it's our input, our stock code, and that is in G6. So where would we like to put the stock code? In G6, and that is your lookup value. Where is your table array? It is over here. Now I'm going to do this in two ways, but we will show you later. I'm highlighting from row 3. There is my array. It's A3 to C31. Now it never moves. Do you remember absolute cell referencing? So your VLOOKUP is not going to work unless you use absolute cell referencing. That array or range of cells is in the same place all the time. So all I do is I press F4. So it's $A, $3 to $C, $31. The next one, the column index number. Now I am searching on column number 1. VLOOKUP always searches on column number 1. I would like the answer, when I put in what the value of column number 1, I would like the answer that is in column number 2, which is the description. If I put there column number 3, it's going to give me the price as we had in our first example. In this case, I now want the item description. So count your columns, students. 1, 2, 3. And my answer is in column number 2. So search on number 1, the value. Search in the table array, return for me the output, the answer that is in column number 2, which would be your description, and I would like an exact match. So this is false. If you have a look here on the right, you will see I have made no errors. There is no red writing here. Be careful that you are sure to learn what is a lookup value, what is a table array, what is a column index number, and what is the range lookup. I'm going to press OK at this point. We will come back to the exercise of the VLOOKUP. And you will have a look. It's giving me an error. It's saying not applicable. That is not a mistake, students. It is because I have not put in a stock code. I'm going to put in stock code number 15. And there we go. It tells me stock code number 15 is a shirt. To check it, let's just use another one. Stock code number 19. And it tells me stock code number 19 is a tie. So what VLOOKUP is doing, it goes where the answer is. VLOOKUP in G6 is where our input goes, or what we are searching on. Then there is our table array or range, which you can see here outlined in pink, and it is 3 columns wide. Return for me the answer that is in column number 2, and return for me an exact match. I don't have any fractions or partial numbers in here, so there is not a comma 1, comma 2, comma 3. We are returning an exact match. So if I put in number 1, it is going to tell me that is a shirt. Now I am going to change this slightly to show you that we don't have to put in the array, that we can put in what we call a named range. I'm going to repeat that for my students. It is called a named range. What we do is we highlight our range that we would like to work with, and I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to throw in a trick here. In fact, no, let's not do that yet. I'm going to highlight A3 to C31, and in the top left hand of your screen is the name box, and at the moment there it's just telling me A3. I am going to call this in caps clothing, and I press enter. So if you have a look on the top left hand side of your screen in the name box, when I highlight that exact range of A3 to C31, it tells me its name is clothing. The same as a person can be given a name, or an item or a pet can be given a name, we can do the same with a range or an array. So we have what we call a named array. So the one I'm going to do now works on my named array, and my named array is clothing. So named, I gave the array the name clothing. And the clothing was in caps, if you recall. So my named array is clothing, and we're going to work on a named array. So again, I can go back and I have column index number 1, which it searches on, column index number 2, which would return me the item description, and column number 3, which would return me the price. I'm going to go back to using the price as we used in our very first example. I'm going to delete my data. I click where I would like the output. I go to formulas, insert function. VLOOKUP is what we are using. And we are going to do it slightly differently to the way we did it just now. The lookup value is the same. It is G6. My table array, I don't have to highlight here anymore, because remember I gave it that name. And what was the named array? It was clothing. The column index number, I'm searching on number 1. What would I like at the moment? Do I want column number 2 or column number 3? I want the price, so I'm going to make that column number 3. And we want an exact match, so I'm going to make that false. And I'm going to tell it OK. Instead of description, we want price here. And it's telling me not applicable. It's not a mistake, students. I have not put an input search stock code. So let's put in there number 17. And it's telling me the price is 420. If I click on there and I click on my function again, I unfortunately can't make this any larger. I hope you can see it in the video. There's our lookup value, which is where our input goes. There's our named array, which is called clothing. There is the column index number where the answer is coming from, column number 1, column number 2, column number 3. I'm telling it show me column number 3. And then the range lookup, which is false, which means return for me an exact match. If you had comma 5s and comma 2s and comma 1s, you could use true there. We may have an example of that later on in the course, but for now, 99.9% of the time, you are looking for an exact match and it will be false. A quick slideshow, students. This video is going to be a little bit longer than you are normally used to. I suggest you watch it either in parts or watch the video several times so that we can get this exactly correct. I have a few rules around MS Excel VLOOKUP, and I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm not going to take a long time. What is a VLOOKUP function? The slideshow will be shared for you so that you can look at the rules. Go back and look at the rules. If you find your VLOOKUP is not working, you often have to go back and look at the rules. It looks up the first column and it moves across the row as we've seen that. It uses the 4 components: the lookup value, the table array, the column index number, and the range lookup. And I've put in here a description for you. So please come and look at the slideshow. Applications in business, what are we going to use this for? We were searching for a stock code or a stock price. You can fill in fields in an invoice, for example. You can make yourself a little invoice that works automatically from your stock list. And we can also include VLOOKUP across numerous lists, which is coming up in an activity. Some rules not to forget. And be careful of this. If you store a number as text, you can get errors and your VLOOKUP will not work. The first column must always be used for the lookup. In other words, if you start on column B, that is column number 1. If you start on column C, that is column number 1. So we're not always starting at A. Some lists might start at B or C or D or E. But please remember the first column is the search column, and it's not necessarily column A. It could be B or C or D or E, but yet that is always column number 1. I hope that makes sense to you guys. The first column is used for the lookup, which is what I've just explained. False and true. False means an exact value. Remember, we had to use our absolute cell references, especially it will work, but when you are using the fill handle, your array or your range or your named range does not move. Therefore, you need to use absolute cell references, or it is going to end up going and looking underneath your stock list. And be aware of the older versions of Excel, and we've come across this problem in some of our other activities. Some of them, the older versions will use a comma, and the newer versions will use a semicolon. So if you find your VLOOKUP is not working, but it looks correct, rather swap your comma for a semicolon or vice versa. Okay, we are now going to move on to Excel 7.1. Let's take a look at the questions and what they would like us to do. Just waiting for Word to open. Okay, and this activity is a timetable. We have given it to you step by step to make it easier at the beginning of VLOOKUP. So there's some instructions in here with your table arrays and so on. Students, if you understood my explanation, you may skip these instructions and move further down to what you would like to complete, which is the room, the email, and the telephone. I will repeat that. If you have understood already what I have done or what I am doing with VLOOKUP, you may jump down to this step just above where it says save your exercise. And what we want to do is we are going to use the subject code, and we're going to look up the lecturer, the room, the email, and actually the telephone. There we go. Room, email. Lecturer is not in the question, but we're obviously going to look up the lecturer. So I am going to look up all of that information, and that is a VLOOKUP, that is a VLOOKUP, that is a VLOOKUP, and that is a VLOOKUP. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 VLOOKUPs which we will copy down. So these are instructions of what I have already explained. If you're understanding that, you may jump to the activity. I'm going to minimize that, and let's open our startup file. We are 2/3 of the way through this lesson, so please hang in there. Let's open our starter file, enable our editing, and I'm going to make this a bit larger so that we can see what we are working with here. Now, all they've given us is the period and the subject, and the only thing that's changing really here, or the only thing that's of use to me, is the subject. But now, where am I getting this information from? If you have a look at the bottom of your spreadsheet, there is another sheet there with our academic information, and it starts with subject. So I'm just going to highlight these headings here so we can see them clearly. The first answer is the first answer in the list is the lecturer, the room, the email, the telephone. If we are searching on column A, which we will be doing, we're searching on column number 1. The lecturer is column index number 2. The room is column index number 3, the email is column index number 4, and the telephone is column index number 5. But if you notice, this is on a different sheet. It is not on the same sheet as per our previous example. but yet it will work exactly the same. Watch carefully at the formula when we do this. So the first thing we would like to do is begin our VLOOKUP. We go to Formulas, Insert Function, VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP what? VLOOKUP on the subject code. Go to the table array. Now this, you will notice, is in another sheet. So I'm going to have to click on the array and highlight my array. And it actually says the academic info sheet A2 to E9. I'm going to highlight the A2 to E9. I'm going to press F4. I'm going to have to go back to, okay, this is going to happen with VLOOKUP. You need to know what your sheet looks like. So let me highlight my array. And the answer was in the lecturer's name, was in column number 2, and we're going to put here for an absolute value false. And there we go. It's shown me Mr. D. Morrison. If I go and look at my list, what's in column number 2, we're searching on column number 1. What's in column number 2 is the lecturer's name, and it's on a different sheet. So before I copy down, if we open our function, or you open your function and have a look at it, it's just telling me my academic info sheet. That is where it must go and look, and it must go and look in the array $A, $2 to $E, $9. I can use my fill handle to copy down. We will now do another VLOOKUP. If we look at our academic info, we just go in column 3, column 4, column 5. So we always search on column number 1. We've just done a VLOOKUP where it brings back the answer in column number 2. We're now going to do 3, 4, and 5. So with that, bearing that in mind, I'm able to do the VLOOKUP just from this sheet because I know what my lecturer list looks like. Insert function, VLOOKUP, VLOOKUP again on the subject, go to my table array. I think I can just press F4. There we go. Column index number 3 in this case. It is the third column where is the answer that I'm looking for. And false. And it's telling me Mr. Morrison or Mr. D. Morrison is in room L10, and I can copy that down. So we've done column number 2, number 3. I'm now going to do 4 and 5. So to get the email using a VLOOKUP, insert function, VLOOKUP, lookup value once again on the subject code. Let's go to our array. It would be easier to name this array as we did in our previous example, but I'm not doing that right now. Column index number 1, 2, 3, we're doing 4, where the answer is in column number 4, and false. Enter. And it brings me back the emails. And then finally the telephone number, which when we have a look is actually in column index number 5. So we're searching on number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would like to bring me back column index number 5. It's the same VLOOKUP with the column index number changing. Insert function. Finally, it's quite a lot of work this. VLOOKUP. Search again on the subject. Where must I search? I need to go into that worksheet and highlight my array. Press F4. Please don't forget to do that because the array does not move. If you forget to press F4, it might work, but when you use the full handle to copy down, it starts to look under that list where it's blank, and then you get errors. column index number 5 in this case, and as per usual everything's false at the beginning. You will come across it true, but not for a while. And there we go. It brings me back the telephone extension, and I can highlight that. And if I use Control tilde to show me my formulas, you will actually see there we have a VLOOKUP under each cell, and all that is changing is the column index number. So all one would need to do is put in the subject, and it automatically will fetch me from the academic info spreadsheet the lecturer name, the room number, the email, and the telephone. Students, please, I suggest you watch this video as many times as is required to watch it in order to understand VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is probably one of the more tricky things that we do, namely because when you actually look at the function, what it is saying here does not make any sense unless you know what they are looking for. So you need to know what is a lookup value, what is a table array, what is a column index number, and what is a range lookup value, which is only true or false. True for an approximate match, false for an exact match. Remember, before I said you don't have to start on A, you can start on B. So if I show you this, if we were looking up on the lecturer name and I highlight it like that, it always looks up in the first column. So this would be column number 1, and I would be searching on the lecturer's name. That would be column index 2, that would be column index 3, and that would be column index 4. Students, please practice this. Please come back to the activity. Please remember to ask your lecturers the questions that need to be asked. I hope this video was clear and that you are able to do a VLOOKUP. It is a great feeling when you get the VLOOKUP correct. And you can do the VLOOKUP on the same page, or it can work as we have worked across sheets. Please do not forget your named range or your named array, and that an array is a range. Thank you for attending this class, and we will continue with lecture 7 with something called HLOOKUP that is a bit simpler. Have a great day.